ABC News political analyst. Explain they're clearly smarter than I am. Explain how they're not supporting Roy Moore, yet she's out supporting Roy Moore.
Well, you're absolutely right. There is enormous conflict and a lot of hypocrisy here. On one hand, Donald Trump and Roy Moore share a political base. You look at the evangelical Christians, 80% of them voted for Trump in the last election. Latest Fox News poll in Alabama shows 2/3 of the evangelicals backing Roy Moore. And there's a real similarity here, Gene, McGraw, because you have a lot of folks in the last election a year ago who said, I have doubts about Donald Trump's character. I worry about his impulsiveness and his lack of judgment, but he's our guy. He's a Republican. He's going to support conservative nominees to the Supreme Court. He's going to be anti-abortion. And so whatever doubts I have about his character, I prefer his policies to Hillary Clinton. And
here's what I don't understand.
The same pattern is showing up in Alabama.
Here's what I don't understand, though. They bend over backwards to support Roy Moore, but criticize Jeff Flake at every turn.
Well, you know, there's a lot of hypocrisy to go around, and you're seeing a lot of it in Alabama, just in the same way you saw it with Donald Trump. I mean, how does a 3 times married man who bragged on tape about his sexual conquest attract the votes of 80% of evangelical Christians? Well, he does it because those voters are deeply concerned about, number one, the issue of abortion, and particularly how it plays out in the Supreme Court. But it's not just abortion; same-sex marriage. It's mandates about health care coverage. So a lot of voters swallowed their doubts about Trump and voted for him.
Yeah.
The same pattern is showing up with Roy Moore. But on the other hand, Trump is not out campaigning for Roy Moore because he doesn't want to alienate a lot of more moderate Republicans, particularly women voters, who would be appalled if he publicly supported Roy Moore. So what Kellyanne Conway and the whole Trump team is trying to do is let's hope Moore wins without our fingerprints on it.
Yeah. Do you believe me, or do you agree with me when these polls are coming out on this Roy Moore candidacy that they're so all over the map and there are so many wild cards that I don't believe any poll coming out of Alabama, and really the only one I'll believe is on Election Day?
I agree. It's very hard to poll in an election like this because you don't know who's going to vote. And all polling depends on an accurate understanding of who actually is going to turn up. This is a special election, always harder to predict. I think that the polls are not reflecting the fact, even though the latest Fox poll showed Doug Jones, a Democrat, ahead by 8 points. I think it goes back to something we've just said. The Moore supporters are highly motivated. They're highly dedicated. They care deeply about the issues that the Supreme Court will deal with in the future. And whatever else they think about Roy Moore, they want him there to vote for Donald Trump's nominees to the courts, to support Trump's social issue policies. And so I think the motivation on the Republican side is going to be pretty strong. Now, I think the Democrats have a shot because Jones is a very credible candidate, former prosecutor. And there might just be a certain number of Republicans who just gag at the notion of supporting Roy Moore, even if they agree with his policies. But I think the polls are probably off, and even though they show Jones ahead at this point, if I had to bet today, I'd still bet on Roy Moore.
Stephen Roberts, I got about 30 seconds. I would think Democrats would want Roy Moore to win because he is going to be the gift that keeps on giving for the next election cycle.
Oh, yeah, you can always make that argument, but in the end, I think winning is still better than losing in politics. There's no doubt that Roy Moore would be a poster child if he were in the Senate. Democrats all over the country would throw Moore's reputation, his outrageous statements in the face of Republican candidates. But, this is a very narrowly constructed Senate. If Moore were to lose, Republicans would have only 51 votes in the Senate. It's possible the Democrats could block tax reform. It's possible they have a better shot at blocking some of the judicial nominees. in the end, those calculations I find weak. Winning's always better than losing in politics.
Steve Roberts, have a good week. Thanks.